Hi, my name is Dr. Jennifer Lightdale, and it is a tremendous honor and a thrill to be interviewing my father as part of the Meet the Masters series for VideoGIE. Dad, thanks for coming and sharing some wisdom and thoughts with us.
Sure.
I think I want to know, and everyone wants to know, what got you into medicine? Take me way, way back and tell me how you got into this.
Well, it goes pretty far back, and it actually starts with kind of a tragedy. When I was 13 years old, my father passed away, and I got involved with doctors for the first time, really, and got to think about how I might be able to help people. Mm-hmm. And that's what really got me thinking about being a doctor.
You hadn't thought about it before?
No, absolutely not.
What had you been interested in?
I was interested in being the usual kid things, you know, baseball player, fireman, you know, things like that.
Okay.
But it really was a very heavy burden that I had at that time at age 13. And my mother was really wonderful and rock strong, but she had to go into the workforce. She had been a homemaker. And I was fortunate because I had some wonderful high school teachers. I had a teacher in English, and I had a teacher in science and physics,
okay.
Who both were very supportive.
This was at Jersey City High School?
Jersey City High School, Snyder High School in Jersey City.
Okay.
And it's a big place, but I had these two wonderful teachers. And that kind of approach, both English and writing and science, kind of goes through my whole life. And I love to write. I wrote 2 essays that won prizes, and national prizes.
In high school?
In high school.
Okay.
One was a short story called The Center of Gravity, which was obviously about science. And another was an essay about diamonds, believe it or not.
Okay, no, I
and
can't
that one,
believe it.
it was quite an event, because I actually won $1,000 for that one, which was
So did you think about
a lot
writing?
of money at the time.
Did you think about writing?
Oh yes, I thought I would be a writer, very possibly be a writer or a journalist. I worked for the local newspaper, the Jersey Journal, and was a sports reporter for high school sports. And when I went to Princeton for college, I majored in English, and I also worked for newspapers. And so it was with the press club there.
But the medicine was the driver?
Medicine was the driver. I took all my pre-med courses, and I enjoyed them too, even the organic chemistry, believe it or not.
I don't believe it. So then you go on to medicine.
And then I go on to medicine, and when I went to medical school, I had many wonderful teachers at Columbia P&S. But one that was particularly notable was a man by the name of Charles Flood.
Okay.
And Dr. Flood was one of the 14 or so doctors who went to Chicago to meet with Rudolf Schindler to form the American Gastroscopic Club in 1941.
Okay.
And that little group grew into the ASGE.
Aha.
And it's...
and he was making an impression on you?
He did. And he was a wonderful person, and he was very interested in the esophagus, which also became a big part of my career.
Okay.
And,
how was he looking at the esophagus?
He looked at it with a rigid endoscope, and
in sedated patients?
They were sort of sedated, and he also did a lot of dilations. He was very well known for treating esophageal strictures with dilators.
Wow.
Bougies.
Okay.
Things. So that was an influence. And then I graduated and went up to Yale New Haven to do my internship and residency, PGY 1 and 2. And there I had wonderful gastroenterology interactions as well. Howard Spiro was there, wrote a famous textbook in gastroenterology, and two very famous hepatologists at the time, Gerald Klatskin and Harold Kahn.
Okay.
And both of them were supportive as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I was interested in GI.
Okay.
And but I didn't stay at Yale. I made a decision, kind of unusual at the time, to take my third year, PGY 3, final year of my training in internal medicine at Cornell in New York.
And why'd you do that?
The reason I did that was very personal. I was dating your mother.
Okay.
And she had a wonderful job at NBC News.
Yes, she likes to tell us about it.
Yes. And so she wasn't going to come to New Haven, no way. So I went to New York, and that worked out quite well. We were married in about 3 months after I came.
Okay, so once you committed, she committed.
Yeah. And
Okay.
it took that move, which she was kind of scared about it at first, but.
Did you meet more gastroenterologists at Cornell that made an impression?
Yes. So the rotations at Cornell were four subspecialties.
Okay.
And my last subspecialty rotation was in gastroenterology. And the program at Cornell was very popular among the residents. Had Marv Schlesinger there and Graham Jeffries. And I couldn't get it. It was oversubscribed. And I went to the chief resident kind of to complain, and it was Anthony Fauci, who's pretty well known.
Yes, at the NIH.
Infectious disease at the NIH. And so he suggested that I go across the street to Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, where they were just starting a GI program under the chief was Paul Sherlock. So I went over there and didn't know what to expect. Had never worked in a cancer center. And it was a pretty intense experience. The amazing part about it was that one of the only GI fellow they had went off to a meeting in Europe, and at the same time extended his trip for a vacation.
How
And
dare
so,
you.
yeah, so I had 3 weeks when there was no fellow, and I got to do endoscopies for the first time with some of the first commercial fiber optic endoscopes.
So these were flexible now.
These were flexible endoscopes.
The kind you look through, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But it was still like
But it was still
advanced.
there. It was it was 1968. It was about 11 years after Hershowitz first showed it at the ASG meeting. It took a long time to get them commercialized. But I had scopes that were made in America, the ACMI Hershowitz gastroscope, and also had Olympus scopes that came in as the Japanese started manufacturing these. So it was quite an experience, and I had this great sense of wonderment that I was looking inside somebody, and I've never lost the thrill of it. I still have it. It's why I'm still working. I just love the sense of it.
Well, when I think of you, I mean, to me it feels like you've made tremendous contributions to the field. You took whatever wonderment you were feeling and just continued to explore what you could do with it.
Right.
What do you consider your greatest contributions, or sort of how you furthered the field?
Yeah, well, the first thing I did was use those upper endoscopes to look at patients at this cancer center, and I really published several papers and did a lot of work with endoscoping them. And actually, the first paper I ever published, I published in the JAMA. It was a lead article in JAMA
Nice.
on upper GI bleeding. Yeah, it was upper GI bleeding in cancer patients. And we found that cancer patients often had upper GI bleeding from other things than cancer. So it was very
So people
useful.
assumed the bleeding was
Assumed it
cancer.
And,
Okay.
yeah, and half the time it wasn't. Yeah.
And-
So that was interesting. And I did a lot of that work. And then I got interested not only in that, looking inside the lumen of the GI tract. I thought maybe I could look outside the lumen as well, because I went into the public health service before my fellowship, and I was stationed in Washington, D.C. for most of the time. This was during the Vietnam War. And I was able to make rounds at Walter Reed Army Medical Center. And the chief of GI there was a man called Worth Boyce.
Yes.
And he also was an esophagologist who really, really loved the esophagus. Another influence toward me in that direction. And then he also did a procedure called laparoscopy, which very few people did in the United States, maybe only a handful. And but I saw him do it, and when after my fellowship at Sloan Kettering, I stayed on the faculty there, and I thought this would really be helpful for cancer patients.
Mm-hmm.
And so I began doing a lot of laparoscopy. I was doing 200 cases a year.
Were you using the belly button?
No, a little higher, because I was looking at the liver a lot of the times.
But you were in the peritoneum.
Yeah, in the peritoneal
Wow.
cavity. And we did it in our endoscopy suite under conscious sedation. And
wow.
the patient tolerated very well. And it was really terrific. And I did a lot of it. And I thought, boy, this is going to just be my career. I wrote a book about it. I published a lot of papers about it, and then things changed.
Great.
CT scans were developed, and a lot of what I did could be done without invading the body.
Hard to imagine medicine before a CT scan, but I would imagine that changed a lot. So.
It did. And then the surgeons figured out that they could do laparoscopy and do therapy with it, and did the laparoscopic cholecystectomy, took out the gallbladder with laparoscopy, and that had never been done before, and changed surgery tremendously. So they took over. So then I think you had to be alert to what else you could do, and what I thought I could do was take up endoscopic ultrasonography. It was just starting in the 80s, and I got one of the first commercial endoscopes to come into the United States, and I really didn't know how to use it. I didn't know anything about ultrasound.
I was going to say.
We were trained to do fluoroscopy, upper GI series and barium enemas, and I learned how to do this procedure with the help of a really great radiologist at Sloan Kettering.
He taught you ultrasound.
Jose Botet. Yeah, taught me how to do ultrasound, taught me all about it. And then I went and lectured all over the country about this great stuff. I was seeing such great stuff. And I thought the potential was so good, and I got a lot of feedback from people that wasn't very nice. People would look at it and say, "What is that? Looks like a weather map. Is it storm coming over the Great Lakes, Doc?" Stuff like that. And but gradually, they began to understand it and began to see the potential. Because you could not only see inside the lumen, you could see the wall of the GI tract, and you can see beyond, especially the pancreas and the bile ducts and things like that. That's become so useful now, and it's such a mainstream technique, particularly in interventional gastroenterology.
So EUS.
EUS, yeah. So that was
that
had legs and stayed, and it was a big contribution. And then
how about therapeutic stuff? It feels to me like you're still out there doing the EMR, I think.
So of course colonoscopy came around, and we started doing polypectomy, and that was an important therapy, and of course had a major impact. And I was there doing some of those first procedures. But I was always interested in the upper tract more, and I got very interested in esophageal adenocarcinoma, which came out of nowhere. I mean, it was virtually non-existent until about the late 1960s, early 1970s, and then it went up like a rocket. So now esophageal adenocarcinoma is the predominant esophageal cancer. Squamous cancer is much less than that. And I was found out that the reason for it was the main thing we could find, the main premalignant condition was Barrett's esophagus. And Barrett's esophagus became another big part of my career.
Yeah.
So to treat that, we needed an ablation therapy. And I got into photodynamic therapy, first for advanced cancer and then for Barrett's esophagus precancers, high-grade dysplasia. And that worked really well. You had to give a drug and then use a laser to activate the drug. So, and it worked really quite well. We got wonderful results, but it had a lot of side effects.
I remember the patients covered with their
got into the skin. They got photosensitive for months. It was very hard on the patients, and it caused a lot of other side effects. It was very cumbersome. I started out, I had a huge laser, took up a lot of room in the endoscopy room, and my colleagues weren't thrilled with that. And then I had actually had to run big power lines in from the elevator bank to
hard to imagine, but okay.
to run the thing.
The laser.
And yeah, so that was interesting. And I actually wound up presenting it to the FDA for the company QLT at the time that made the photofrin. We did the laser and drug together, and we had a huge subcommittee of 12 people for both drug and laser.
They've come a long way, right?
They've come a long way. And I was just doing a lot of that, again, just like laparoscopy. I was doing a lot of photodynamic therapy. And then radiofrequency ablation came around. And as soon as I saw it, I knew the photodynamic therapy was finished because it was so much easier to do and had so much less side effects, was very well tolerated and worked very well. So that became important. And then I learned how to do endoscopic mucosal resection on a trip to Japan. And that was really essential to take out all of the visible lesions. So we got into doing Barrett's therapy, and all of a sudden, people with high-grade dysplasia didn't have to have esophagectomies anymore. And now that's become quite the standard of care. Even the thoracic surgeons accept that we can take care of early lesions and avoid
catching it early.
Yeah, catching it early, and that's become so important for me.
Dad, can we take a few minutes and talk about editing?
Oh yeah, so then editing, again, you know, this always comes up, my writing and editing, and for 8 years, 2 4-year terms, I edited a journal, Gastrointestinal Endoscopy, now GIE we call it.
GIE, yes.
And when I got the journal from Bernie Schumann, who was the editor then, he gave me the journal in a shoebox filled with 5x7 cards. That was the journal. And
that was the names of his reviewers.
The reviewers were on there, and what he thought of their reviews and all that stuff. And I enlisted your mother to be my managing editor. And as you know, she's a terrific editor. She's an amazing editor. So she was the managing editor, and she said, well, we got to have something more than the shoebox. And computers were just coming out. And so this was back in 1988.
80s, right? Yeah, mid-80s, okay.
Yeah, and so we were able to get a software package from the publisher for journal management, and we started doing that, and that was really good.
Probably novel at the time.
But the amazing thing was that endoscopy was growing so much. There was so many people doing endoscopy all of a sudden that the submissions to the journal quadrupled, and we were publishing only every other month. It came out 6 times a year. And I moved it to every month. I had to convince the society leadership that was a good thing to do, and they were concerned that I was going to lose money, but the advertisers stepped up and bought enough pages for us. And we moved the journal up to monthly, which made it kind of a more important journal. And but the manuscripts flooded in to such an extent that before that, you know, endoscopy was so new. I used to accept almost all the papers, but after 2 or 3 years, I had to reject a lot of people, and it was hard to reject people's papers, but I used to. Rena, my wife, used to save them up for me on a Saturday night, pile them up on my chair, wouldn't let me go to bed until I finished rejecting.
So you wrote those negative letters.
So I put on some nasty opera like Wagner or something, and it made a lot of noise and thunder, and I would just do all this, what I call the Saturday Night Massacre, and just reject all those papers. And it was you know, we had to do it, and we did it, and that was the way we did it.
Dad, can you give some advice to those people who want to submit their papers or follow their life career or see themselves as master endoscopists someday? How do you get there?
Well, I think you have to have a passion for what you do. You have to find something that really excites you. For me, it was endoscopy, and I never lost that. And then you have to be flexible with what you do, because technology changes, things change, and you have to adjust. I call it an odyssey, not a straight line career. And you move from one thing to another as you have to.
Homer.
Yeah, right, Homer. And, you know, I think that's an important thing, to have that flexibility. And the other thing is you have to have time for your family and your friends, and you can't live life on a work island. That's a mistake. I've seen people do it, and it doesn't work very well.
Okay.
So you have to have give time for your family and friends, and I always tried to do that, and I think that's an important career thing. And then just keep up that passion. And I think if your passion is endoscopy, I think you're in the right place, because I think this is such a powerful method. It will continue to be a powerful method, and I think an important part of gastroenterology forever. So I'm happy that I had a part in it. I really am.
You sure did, that's for sure.
Thank you.
Great, Dad.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dad.